Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this information session on a program that we call Structural Transformation of African and Asian Agricultural and Rural Spaces. My name is David Shirley. I'm professor of agricultural food and resource economics, at Michigan State University, and I'm director of PRCI. PRCI is the USAID funded innovation lab, it is called, for food security policy research, capacity, and influence. I'm joined in this session by Professor Chris Barrett, who will introduce himself momentarily, from Cornell University. And Cornell, cooperating with MSU, Cornell runs the STAARS Plus program within PRCI. So welcome once again. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for your interest in this very important component of what PRCI does. So I'm going to give you just a bit of brief background about PRCI, and then I'll be turning it over to Professor Barrett. So PRCI is a program, as I said, funded by USAID through Michigan State University with its collaborators and with its partners, Cornell, IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, and organizations across Africa and Asia, with a central focus, with the central purpose of building institutional capacity to do applied research, as this slide says, on issues related to food security and nutrition, and then to use that research, to do that research in a way, and to use that research to bring it to bear on policy debate and policy decisions. So PRCI very much does invest in individual capacities, as you will see from this presentation on the STAARS program and from your interest in it. However, we do this in a context in which people are linked in ongoing, meaningful ways to institutions, to organizations involved in policy research and policy engagement, so that by building human capacity, individual capacity, we're also building institutional capacity. So there are three broad components of PRCI, how we go about building this capacity. One is a broad institutional strategic planning exercise that we've gone through with a number of organizations, so far only in Africa, but that broad institutional strategic planning could expand to Asian organizations that are interested in that activity. We also directly build research capacity through mentoring and technical training. STAARS is one component of that. I'll say a little bit more about the approaches to building research capacity in a second. That's our second component. And then the third component of PRCI is building capacity to integrate policy impact strategies into research. So as I said, we try from the very beginning of the definition of research questions to be thinking about what the policy messages might be, who the interested policy parties are, and what our strategies might be to reach those interested parties and influence the way they think about their policy decision-making. So to wrap up here then, we have two approaches to building research capacity, and the STAARS Plus program is within this program of building research capacity. So on the one hand, we have long-term relationships with particular research centers and the researchers in them. So we have relationships with 3 centers across Africa. We have relationships with a RENAPRI, regional network of policy research centers in Africa. We have relationships with Gasetsart University in Thailand, and with RIS in New Delhi, India, and with organizations, research centers in several countries of South and Southeast Asia, who we work with through Gasetsart and through IRS. So on the one hand, we have long-term relationships with particular research centers, okay, and the researchers in them. And then we have this additional program again, run by Cornell University through PRCI. And this is what you're going to be learning about today, where we have a competitive awards process to institutionally affiliated researchers. So everybody on this call should be an institutionally affiliated researchers from any center in a low or lower middle income country. So with that brief background and having introduced STAARS Plus, I'm happy to turn it over to Professor Barrett from Cornell.
Great, thanks so much, Dave, for that excellent introduction to the PRCI Innovation Lab. As Dave mentioned, my name is Chris Barrett. I'm a professor at Cornell University in the Charles Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management, with affiliations in a couple other units on campus. And I've had the great pleasure to direct the predecessor program to STAARS Plus STAARS, the same acronym without the A for Asian and without the plus. I've been involved in that since its creation 6 years ago. STAARS trains individuals. STAARS Plus adds 2 essential changes to the STAARS program. The first is to expand this to institutions in South and Southeast Asia, so it's not just covering Sub-Saharan Africa. And secondly, the plus part is that it's team-based. It's oriented towards institutional capacity building, as Dave already mentioned. So the STAARS Plus Fellows program is oriented towards policy-oriented, rigorous food security research. So work that falls clearly in the domain encompassed by PRCI more broadly, but that's a relatively expansive space. This involves everything from the processes of agricultural development or development of the rural non-farm economy, more broadly, agricultural and rural transformation, the development of healthy food systems, post-farm gate, individual and community and household resilience. There are a wide range of topics that fits cleanly within the STAARS program mandate. The crucial thing here to keep in mind is that we're looking for teams of 2 or 3 researchers with a common institutional affiliation and strong host institution support. So strong support from the leadership of their own institution in Sub-Saharan Africa or South or Southeast Asia. Those teams submit a proposal. I'll cover details in just a couple of moments. And those proposals are then screened in a competitive process and matched with prospective mentors, senior faculty at Cornell, at Michigan State, senior research fellows at IFPRI. So the 3 institutions that are at the heart of the PRCI Innovation Lab on the United States side of that program, we provide the senior mentors, experienced researchers who will work closely with that research team to jointly author a paper on a topic of mutual interest falling within the PRCI research domain over the 18-month fellowship period. The program is built on the really fundamental idea that we invest in not just individuals, but also small teams. And the development of small teams and individuals' research capacity and their professional development skills is in a way that aligns with the institutional level policy and research capacity building priorities more broadly of their home institution. We're looking to help to develop and maintain the skill set, the international connectivity, and the visibility of the policy-oriented research of small teams, especially of younger researchers at institutions in these countries and these 2 regions. So the whole idea is to help to build institutional capacity to conduct cutting-edge, impactful research as it relates to food security, nutrition, and agricultural and rural development. So the application requirements, which are spelled out on the PRCI website, so you don't need to quickly take all of this down. And I should add that Jim Monahan at the PRCI Innovation Lab will be making available a recording of this webinar on the PRCI website. So you can go back if there's something that you want to pick up on that you think you might have missed. But the application requirements are meant to be pretty straightforward, not terribly onerous. We do require that applications be submitted in English. Mentors will typically work in English with the teams. The team can be no more than 3 and no less than 2 researchers. So as you'll see, we have the first cohort of STAARS Plus research teams will be presenting their work next week. And we had 2 teams of 2 and 2 teams of 3. They have to come from and be affiliated with the policy research institutions that are eligible. The priorities are the centers that have the strongest affiliation with PRCI, but this is a tremendous opportunity for small teams of researchers affiliated with other institutions in low and middle income countries in South and Southeast Asia or in sub-Saharan Africa to join the broader PRCI community. The website has a very simple applicant biodata information form that needs to be filled out for each of the 2 or 3 team members. We're looking there, for example, for indications of eligibility. We're looking for people who have at least an MS degree, preferably a PhD, but they cannot have completed their PhD more than 10 years ago. And we'll only allow someone to be more than 5 years out from the PhD in the case of 1 member of a 3-person team. So the idea is to work with teams of younger research active members of the Policy Research Institute staff. We're looking for people who have done published work at some point in the last 4 years. Besides the title page, the core of the proposal is just a 2,500 word concept proposal. Let me emphasize a couple of key things here. We are looking for a very clear enumeration of what question you plan to ask and answer. So what is the policy relevant question or questions you propose to answer? So that's the motivation for why should PRCI invest in your team. What are the data you plan to use and the methods you plan to use to answer that question? And in describing data, the data need to be in hand. There's not funding available through this program to mount new data collection efforts, and there's not time to start a large data collection effort. So this is a program that is oriented towards using data that a research team already has access to. And we'll look for you to document your access to that data, that you not only know of the data, but that you either have the data or you already have permission to use the data and to publish from it. Bibliographic references are not included in the word limit. The key here is you need to convince us that this is a publishable topic that is relevant to policy research questions in the food security, nutrition, agricultural, and rural development space, and that you have a credible strategy to complete the research that you're proposing within the 18-month period with the assistance and guidance and active engagement of your mentor and co-mentor. We look for the institution to provide written evidence that they support you in this, that they will provide you with the time needed to complete your work, including time to come visit Cornell or Michigan State or IFPRI or some combination of those, depending upon who your mentors are and what works best for your team. So your institution needs to provide a letter of support that indicates they will give you adequate paid time from the institution to undertake the research. Travel funds to cover all the costs of your active participation, all the travel involved in your active participation will be provided through the PRCI Innovation Lab. But the institution has to have some skin in the game. It has to be committed to the development of these individual team members. That's why it's so important that these be policy research relevant topics that the institution wants some assistance with. The application process is pretty straightforward. We run it from Cornell with the active involvement of individual scholars at MSU and IFPRI. Applications need to be submitted by the end of the day, New York time in the US on August 15th. So they just get submitted by email. The email address is on your screen and it's posted on the RFP. It's pretty straightforward. So just one document or one zip file that contains multiple components, whatever works easiest for you. If you have questions about the program, you can email either the PRCI team, the link is on the RFP on their website, or you can email this STAARS Plus email address at Cornell. We talk pretty much every day, and we will get back to you with answers to your questions. You're probably wondering about the review process. Proposals are all submitted for peer review. We have at least 2 people who read in full every proposal. We draw that from a pool of experts at Cornell, MSU, and IFPRI. We then, having screened and rated all of the proposals that are submitted, we identify those that are eligible and that got a high score. We circulate those, what we call semifinalists, to a pool of senior mentors who have made themselves available to work with these teams. So MSU faculty, Cornell faculty and research staff, and IFPRI research staff are all in the pool of mentors. When we find a match, so a team that is eligible and got a high rating for its proposal, and we have a Michigan State, Cornell, or IFPRI senior scholar prepared to mentor that team for 18 months, then we, in parallel to that, I should say, we ask the team, so it doesn't have to be each of the 3 members, but we ask the team to complete a relatively straightforward test of skills in statistical analysis software. It can be completed in either Stata or R. This is just to ensure that there's adequate competence in handling and managing the data that you plan to use in your study. So the semifinalists are asked to complete those Stata and R tests while we're doing matching, and then we take all that data together and we come up with the best set of prioritized teams matched with a mentor and a co-mentor. So you get 1 senior scholar and 1 more junior person, commonly a postdoc or a advanced PhD student with very strong technical skills who can work with the team on, for example, reviewing and improving coding or documentation of data handling, et cetera. So all of that process will take place in somewhere around 6 weeks. So we expect to notify people by October 1st if they've been selected. And at that point, we introduce the mentor and co-mentor with their teams and with the institutional leadership. The timeline then, after the cohort is selected, roughly October 1st, things start quickly. We meet with the institutional leadership to make sure that they understand what they've signed on for with their team. We begin team meetings between mentor, co-mentor, and the research team to begin to map out a work plan. We begin a whole program of professional development trainings intended to help to build some of the soft skills, commonly untaught skills that are more easily absorbed at major research institutions like MSU or IFPRI or Cornell. So we walk people through grantsmanship and how to navigate peer review and how to develop and mark up your code for reproducibility and good practices in data management, all of those sorts of things. And then the intent is that over the course of the 3 or 4 months from October through December or January, each team and its mentors have developed a draft of their paper. We've presented this internally through virtual workshops where everybody is working together, commenting on each other's work. And then in early spring, in March, April, there was a visit to Cornell, IFPRI, or MSU for intensive work as a team with their mentors. And that's really meant as the time that we push very hard to complete a very solid first draft such that it can be polished, presented at conferences, turned into policy briefs, extended in outreach for policy audiences in the home country to be finalized in December of 2022. So that's the process we have just completed with the first STAARS cohort. These 10 individuals whose photos you see right here coming from 4 different institutions in Sub-Saharan Africa, the African School of Economics at Benin, IDRM, Drought Resilience, forgive me, I've forgotten what IDRM stands for now, but at Bardar in Ethiopia, BAM in Senegal, and EPRC in Uganda are both policy centers for PRCI. Those 4 teams will be presenting a week from today on the 27th at 9 a.m. US time. So if you would like to get a sense of what's the sort of research that's being done and who are the sorts of researchers who comprise these STAARS Plus teams, please join us for this presentation of the completed papers from the first cohort of STAARS Plus teams. You can register at the link there, and Jim has put it in the Q&A as well. So with that, Dave and I can answer your questions. We very much appreciate your interest in the STAARS Plus program supported by the PRCI Innovation Lab of USAID. If you put questions in the Q&A, we will be able to answer them either live, or we can answer them with electronically if you want to email us. Dave, do you have anything else, or Jim, do you have anything that you want to add?
I don't have anything more to add, Chris. That was a great overview. I'm just encouraging folks to look in the chat window for the link again that Chris referred to, that Jim put, so you can register for the upcoming webinar that will be happening in 1 week. So you can get a sense for the kind of work that previous STAARS fellows did. Also want to encourage you to use the Q&A window to ask any questions right now that you might have. And we can then, I think we'll probably answer what we can verbally. And if a lot of them come in and we're not able to get to them all verbally, we will answer them in writing. Yes.
Otherwise, Dave and I are just going to tell jokes, and that will be painful.
Pretty much.
So, see, a question is, only PRCI member countries eligible to apply? I'm not sure I fully understand exactly what is meant by the question, but let me take a stab at this. All so teams of researchers, 2 or 3 researchers from any institution, policy research institution in sub-Saharan Africa or in lower middle income countries of South and Southeast Asia, so not from Singapore, but you can, any other country, they're all eligible to apply. So they do not have to already be CPLs within PRCI. Indeed, this is one mechanism through which other institutions can secure a PRCI affiliation if they don't already have it. But we do prioritize the CPL teams from the CPLs within the PRCI Innovation Lab or from the RENAPRI network. Dave, is that accurate for you?
Yes, that's accurate. And the CPLs are Centers for Policy Leadership. These are the institutions that I referred to earlier with which PRCI has a long-term relationship, right? But the explicit purpose of STAARS Plus, as Chris said, is to expand the reach of PRCI and allow those who do not have an affiliation with one of those organizations in one of those countries to also affiliate with PRCI, draw on the mentoring capacity that PRCI has, and build up your skills.
And I see Thlani asks whether 2 institutions from the same country can collaborate in this fellowship. Yes, but keep in mind, then that requires the leadership from both institutions to commit to the time, supporting the time of the researcher from their institution. And this has to be a topic that is expressly of interest to both institutions within the same country. So the within the same country is important so that there's a clear target policy audience. This doesn't have to be restricted to just one institution, but frankly, it gets much harder to bridge multiple institutions on a 2 or 3 person team effectively. So you'd have a little bit of an extra burden to demonstrate to us that that coordination is feasible and appropriate. So will a team of researchers come with qualitative and others with quantitative academic training suitable? So is mixed methods research suitable for STAARS Plus, I think is how I'm interpreting Indika's question. And the answer is yes. So good mixed methods of research is certainly feasible. We are expecting that people will use micro data. So whether those quantitative data, typically survey or administrative data, whether those are supplemented with qualitative information, is entirely a function of what's good research design for the question at hand. So mixed methods work involving both qualitative and quantitative work is very much eligible, but it is not a substitute for high quality work that has a strong quantitative underpinning to it. Dave,
So
do you want
just
to
to
add
augment,
anything?
yeah, just to augment that. So for example, if your center has the funding to allow you to do complementary focus group interviews and so forth, or other qualitative techniques to add qualitative data and information to what you do, that would be fantastic. But as Chris said, you have to have a core quantitative database that you can use to apply the techniques that you'll be learning and have already learned, if you have a PhD or even an MS, of course, to the work. Yes.
So Lizzie from the Nigerian Women Agro-Allied Farmers Association asks a question to which I don't really know the answer. So Dave, I'm going to deflect this to you. Her question is, can upcoming civil society groups qualify in this call?
Yeah. That's a very good question. And I think that the answer depends on kind of the orientation of that civil society group. The key requirement here is that your organization have an interest in research, that it be conducting research, and that it support you with salary time to be able to put your time, and it's a significant amount of time that you'll be putting into this work, to put your time into this research. So, and it's easy to underestimate the amount of time it will take to do good, solid, rigorous research. And so I guess we would we'll say that you are eligible to apply. You will, however, have the burden of convincing us, and your organization's leadership will need to really show us that they have the commitment to allow you to put the time into doing this kind of research. I guess that would be my response.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. See, Isaac asks about data that do not focus on agriculture and food security, whether those projects based on such data are eligible for STAARS Plus. And as an example, because DHS survey is one of the data sources, but most DHS data don't focus on agriculture and food security. Yes, Isaac, we are not, we're open to any of a very broad range of topics that fall under the general umbrella of agricultural and rural transformation, agricultural development, agri-food value chains, resilience. There's more detail in the RFP online if you want to read through it. But many of the data sets that STAARS and STAARS Plus fellows have used were not special purpose data sets collected to study agriculture or food security issues specifically. Rather, they were studying broader questions. So for example, if you tune into the seminar next week, you'll hear presentations on broader resilience that are based off of the LSMS surveys that were not targeted for agriculture, but they're central to understanding the transformation of rural spaces in sub-Saharan Africa and South and Southeast Asia. So very good question. We're not restricting you at all to data collected special purpose for agricultural purposes. You can use any of a suite of high quality data, including data your own institution or partner institutions have collected. You just have to demonstrate that the research topic fits under the broader umbrella and the data are appropriate to the research question.
And let me emphasize also that these data, when we talk about agriculture, we're not just talking about farming. We're talking about the whole food system, the supply chain from farmers up to consumers, right? So if you have data sets on traders, on processors, different levels in a value chain, it may or may not include data on farmers, right? All of this data can be used. So we're agnostic on what point in the value chain or in the food system you need to focus on. You can focus beyond the farm if that's your interest and if you have the data to do so.
Yeah, excellent point, Dave. Indeed, next week, the BOM team from Senegal will present their work from the first cohort, which is on estimating consumer demand for rice. They're interested in trade policy as it relates to rice, the principal staple commodity in Senegal, and the differences in consumer demand patterns for imported versus domestic rice and how that varies between rural and urban spaces. That's a very downstream question. It's not at all about farm level questions. It's about the food system, in this case, policy issues related to consumer demand patterns. Let's see, Sylviane asks whether if a researcher is not affiliated with any research institution at the moment, can you still apply? Unfortunately, Sylviane, no. So the PRCI's support for the STAARS Plus program is founded in its mandate to engage in institutional capacity building. So that's why the STAARS Plus program is for teams that have an institutional home in one of the target countries. So we have a separate program called STAARS, drop the third A, for which individual researchers are eligible. That RFP will come out in January. So we've been running that program for 6 years. Sounds like you might be interested in this STAARS program that is for individuals rather than the STAARS Plus program that is for teams from institutions. Jonah asked, can 2 researchers from one institution apply? Absolutely. So you can have multiple teams from the same institution, each applying separately on different questions. We had that in the first cohort where there were at least 2 institutions that had 2 different submissions from 2 different teams. That's fine. Again, as the question came up earlier, we're looking for clear evidence of strong institutional support for the team and for the specific research question being explored by the team. So if you have an institution that is prepared to commit to your work on this topic under the STAARS Plus program, by all means, consider applying. Rainer asks, can I use data from a country other than my country of residence and country of origin? Absolutely. But the core question is going to be, what institution are you affiliated with and what is its entry point into policy dialogue? So again, the research is intended to help influence and inform policy. So working, for example, on data from the United States is not going to help to influence policy, national level policy in any of the countries in the target region. So you just need to be able to explain why not just the research question is interesting, but why this is policy relevant and how your institution can use the fruits of your research to help influence policy in the country you're researching. So that doesn't have to be where you're living or where you were born, but we do care about the focus is on the countries listed in the RFP. Dave, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's a good response. I mean, just it can be done. It just puts the burden on you to show us, as Chris was saying, that how this can be brought to bear on policy debate in the country where you're doing the work. Yes.
Let's see, Robertson says in 2018, you applied through the STAARS, not the STAARS Plus email address, but received no acknowledgement or feedback. Hope that was a technical hiccup. Most probably, I apologize if you didn't get an acknowledgement. We do acknowledge all applications. You are referring to the companion, the sister program to STAARS Plus, the straight STAARS program for individuals. Does knowledge of SPSS taken into account? SPSS, with all due respect, is much more limiting in what one can do than RR or Stata or several other packages. So we are open to discussing other software packages, but one's ability to work with mentors and co-mentors requires that you can share common technical language too. Maybe Dave will correct me, but I doubt there are many people doing active peer-reviewed publication-oriented research at MSU or IFPRI who are working in SPSS. There certainly aren't at Cornell. So can you work in SPSS? Yes, but we would expect you to be able to work in common with your mentor and co-mentor in one of the workhorse languages of contemporary quantitative policy research, and that's overwhelmingly Stata and R.
Yeah, I would just second that. It is overwhelmingly state NR. SPSS had its day. It was the dominant package many years ago. And for some basic analyses, it's still very useful for folks. But for the kind of analysis you're going to be doing under STAARS Plus, it won't be adequate. So you're going to have people on your team able to work in STATA or R.
See, Tamu asks, I'm a little confused how we manage to collect field data if the data cannot be obtained from institutions. What if our institution cannot cover the costs thereof? Not entirely sure I'm understanding the question. What I'm inferring is that you would like to conduct research for which you don't yet have data. You wish to go out and secure data, and you are wondering how you cover the costs of collecting or securing data. STAARS Plus and STAARS are not about collecting data. We're trying to work with researchers to tap one of the many existing data sets. So if you're looking to go collect data, then I'm afraid STAARS does not typically have, STAARS Plus doesn't have resources to facilitate that. PRCI more broadly has some resources working with the CPLs for limited numbers of new data activities that Dave could describe, but that is outside of the STAARS program. So if you don't already have access to suitable data for the STAARS Plus research project you're proposing, then your application unfortunately won't be viable.
Exactly. So examples of the kinds of data that you can use are data sets, nationally representative data sets collected by your national statistical agency. So for example, the DHS that there was a question about, LSMS style surveys, household consumption and expenditure surveys, or surveys collected, data collected under projects. So the one group in Senegal is using, I don't know if that's the STAARS group, but one of the groups involved in PRCI, okay, is using data, statistically representative survey collected under a project to look at rice demand. So there are a range of different data sets that you can use, but you cannot collect them under PRCI because there are not the funds to do that. You need to have them in hand and have the right to use them in your analysis.
Yeah, I would just emphasize that the world is awash in data now if one takes the time to look around. Indeed, there are arguably far more reasonably good quality data sets that are not yet very well exploited than there are data sets that are very well exploited. People are familiar with the LSMS or DHS data sets, which are very high quality, expensive, nationally representative surveys collected by national statistical agencies in cooperation with international expert teams. But there are many other good quality data sets, including administrative data sets. And in an era of abundant remotely sourced data, there's also an awful lot of data available online if one just takes time to search and download and match it up correctly. So while there certainly are good reasons to go collect new data to address particular questions, that's beyond the scope of STAARS Plus. And if you have a good research question, I would encourage you to invest a little bit of time in just searching whether data already exists with which you could answer this question. PSES asks, how many teams of researchers from a country will be chosen, or will there only be one team of each country? We have no quotas by country. So we don't guarantee that any country within the region will receive funding for a STAARS team, nor are we averse to funding multiple teams operating within the same country. We might pause about funding multiple teams from the same institute, although we have no rule against that. If there's one institution that submits multiple proposals for multiple teams, and those are just the best proposals we receive, and we have mentors eager to work with those teams, we could fund 2 teams from the same institution. So it's a great question, PSES, but there are no such restrictions. So what we're really looking for is the quality of the proposed research, the promise of the team, and the availability of a high-skilled, experienced mentor eager to work with the team on that question. See, we don't have any other questions in the queue right now. Please feel free to to keep sending them in. Meanwhile, Dave, do you want to say anything else about PRCI more broadly?
So the PRCI, as I said, is run by Michigan State University with collaboration with Cornell and IFPRI and our cooperating partners in Africa and Asia. We have really made a major effort under PRCI to put our local researchers and our local research organizations in the lead in defining what kind of capacity development needs that they have, right? STAARS is a reflection of that. We're not imposing topics on you. We're not coming to you and saying, we want to research this topic or that topic. Would you like to work with us? We're asking you to propose what you see as interesting and relevant, what your research center, what your research organization considers to be relevant and important for their country, right? And then we're to see what we can do to support you in that kind of research. So that's the kind of approach that animates PRCI's work with all of its partners, both in the STAARS program and then what we call the Core Center Research Program, which is the other research program we have working longer term with a currently now defined set of organizations. So yeah, I don't think I need to say more at this point about PRCI. I do see another question has come up, Chris.
Yeah, Rainer asks, can we reach out to potential mentors prior to submitting a proposal? Absolutely, Rainer, that's a great question. Please, if you already have some connection to a researcher at IFPRI or at MSU or at Cornell, or if you just know the work of somebody at one of those three institutions that you think could inform the topic you wish to tackle in a STAARS Plus project, by all means, reach out to him or her. I can't commit whether people will be responsive and whether they'll work actively with you on developing your proposal, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with trying to cultivate a collaborative relationship prior to your STAARS proposal being submitted. Please feel free to do that. See, is there a requirement of having a mentor prior to applying? If so, how do we identify potential mentors and any need of having a local mentor? Great question, Robertson. No, you do not have to have identified a mentor prior to applying. We will match proposals that are of sufficient quality. So after the review of the team and its proposal, we identify semi-finalist proposals and we shop those around to mentors at MSU, Cornell, and IFPRI on your behalf. So we look for a senior scholar ready to work with that team on that topic once we've vetted the proposals. So you don't have to identify them. There is no problem, however, picking up on the prior question, there's no problem if you do happen to identify somebody, if you are in touch with someone at one of those three institutions who you would like to work with and they would like to work with you, by all means, please feel free to flag that in the proposal that you submit to us, and that can help inform us as we're shopping you around for local mentors. Now, in terms of a local mentor, meaning at your host institution, we assume that that is something that your institution already takes care of. That's part of looking for an institutional letter of commitment that indicates they're prepared to release you to travel to Cornell or MSU, that they're prepared to give you the time you need to conduct that research. And we would hope and expect that that also involves providing you with local mentoring, which doesn't necessarily mean working actively with you on the technical parts of your research project, but it does mean helping to support your professional development and the development of a successful research project that represents your institution. See, Anthony asked, does existing data on forestry livelihoods and food security qualify for the program? Absolutely. In fact, we have a STAARS fellow, an individual fellow in the sister program from Madagascar, who's just published a very nice paper on rural households, land management, and forestry and forest clearing choices that fits within this broader domain. It relates to rural transformation. rural households that are engaged in agriculture, also engaged in forestry, and much of that is motivated by their food security concerns. Absolutely on topic.
Let me just add to that yeah, it's completely acceptable topic. If you have a data set, however, that is kind of custom collected for a certain purpose, i.e. that is not a DHS data set, that is not an LSMS data set, which are, their quality is widely known, their sampling approach is widely known, and so forth, then you do need in your proposal to speak in some detail about the data set. What was the sampling frame? You need to show that it was a statistically well-designed sample. You need to be clear about what the universe is that you're going to be able to represent. What's the group of people or of entities that you're going to be able to represent with this data? So again, if it's not something like a DHS or an LSMS, spend some time showing that it was a properly designed, well-collected piece of data with a clearly defined universe that you can speak to in your analysis.
Yeah, excellent addition, Dave. Thanks. Keep in mind, everyone, that the point of these research projects is to help inform policy. So you have to be able to connect it to particular policy questions and to particular populations or subpopulations for which your data are satisfactorily representative. We're winding down on time, and the question queue is empty. So if you have other questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A or email them to us afterwards at the email address that's on your screen or the one that's available on the PRCI website. Again, please read the RFP closely. There's lots of detail in there that we did not cover today. We've covered all the highlights today in this webinar, but please read through those details and be sure to pay careful attention to completing everything that is requested in the application materials. So there's an application materials packet that you can download from the PRCI website. Jim has made it very easy for you. Just every year we always get a couple of applications that just don't include everything that was requested. So you make it easy to knock out your proposal if you don't include all the materials. Please double check that you've sent everything. You've sent the CVs, a complete statement, the institutional letter or letters of support, etc. Thanks.
Okay, well, we don't have any more questions. I think this has been time really well spent. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for each of you for attending this. We're really excited to have this second cohort of STAARS Plus get started and to welcome some new members to the PRCI community. So we look forward to seeing the applications come in August 15th, and then the STAARS Plus team will be in touch with the winning members. So if there are no further questions, I think we will wrap up for now.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.